Hello and welcome to the January 4th Citizen Advisory Committee meeting. Happy New Year to everyone. We'd like to call the meeting to order and start with a roll call.
Okay, Gilmore? Present. Holloway?
Present.
Woods?
Present.
Patel?
Here.
Miller?
Present.
Kiefer?
Present.
Hodges?
Here.
Nolan? Johnson?
Present.
Lord?
Here.
Klassen?
Here.
Kelly? Obleton? Winkler?
Here.
And Byrd is excused. So we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the business is citizens with CAC business to present to the Citizen Advisory Committee. Seeing none, I'd like to move to the next item. I'd like to welcome a new CAC member, Nancy Nolan.
And Nancy did tell me she was going to be calling in, but maybe she's having technical difficulties. So
Okay.
perhaps just at the end of the meeting, we can return to her and see if she's on the line at that time.
Sounds great. Like to review and approve minutes from the November 2nd, 2020 meeting.
Move to approve.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor,
Aye.
all those opposed? Thank you. Next is review and accept financial report through August.
And I do have one question. It looks like the formula failed on the economic development.
Okay.
I can get that fixed. I think it's just coming up with that division error because it's a 0 divided by a 0 because they weren't awarded any new money this year, any new entitlement funds. They'll still earn their program income, but I didn't notice that, but I think it's just a 0 divided by 0 error. So I can fix it for next time.
Thank you for that, Aaron. Are there any other additions or corrections?
Move to approve.
Been moved. Any seconds?
Second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? Next, we have an action item. We have a application from the Salvation Army. The application was submitted late. I will let staff give us an update on that and we'll review their information.
Okay, so in your packet, you have the memo just regarding the Salvation Army's submission, and we do have staff from Salvation Army on the line to discuss with you their request. I would remind everyone on the call that this year is the first year that we went to an online submission system. Previous to this, it had always been on paper. And so we did shift the system a little bit just in case any of our members had forgotten that from our November meeting. And so we do have, it looks like Kelly Larned and Malia Dunn from Salvation Army are both with us virtually. So if you would like to talk at all, feel free.
I want to say first thing for giving us the opportunity to speak. My name is Kelly Larned, and I'm the Salvation Army. I'm the program and operations director for the Salvation Army Family Services, and Leah Dunn is the housing manager, and she is here as well. The Salvation Army is requesting an extension to finish up the Davenport CDBG grant application that was due on December 28th, and this is due to COVID-19. On December 11th, I started having symptoms of COVID. I got tested on that day. I found out on the following Tuesday that I was positive. I was extremely sick. I actually just returned to work from COVID today. Malia, and I'm normally the one that does the Davenport CDBG. I do the draws, I do the reports, and I normally work with our development director to do the grant application. We haven't had a development director since June of 2020. So myself and Malia has been working with me on grants, but this was her first time doing Davenport CDBG. Then on December 16th, I found out that 4 other staff members in our building had tested positive, which included Malia. And Malia also returned to work today due to both of us being extremely sick. We are asking for an extension. We would like to ask until Wednesday at 4:30. If that's not possible, we would take as much extension as possible. We have worked on it. There's a couple of documents that I couldn't get uploaded from my house when I was sick with COVID. But the application, like the questions, all that kind of stuff is answered and it is uploaded. And so we just need a little bit more extension. We were not able to, when we came in today, work on it because now since last Wednesday, we haven't had any internet or phones. And so we have set up tomorrow to go work at our adult rehab center if we still don't have internet and phones, so that we can make sure everything's attached and everything is correct. So we're just asking for a couple more days, and I know that this is typically not what we do. We do not turn in late grant applications or anything like that, but due to COVID, and that is my main job to do it, and I was too sick to be able to do it, and Malia tried, and then she got sick. So I'm just asking until Wednesday, or at least until tomorrow at 4:30, to get the extension to finish up attaching what I couldn't get attached from at home. So thank you for your time and consideration on this matter.
Are there any questions from CAC members?
I have a question. You said there's been no development director since June?
Correct. Myself and Malia have been doing all the grants along with our other job that we are hired to do. And so that person is normally the one that would do the grants, the one, specifically the one for Davenport CDBG. But we have not had one. And so I was ready to do it and have done it before with the help of the development director. But then I got sick and Malia had never seen it or done any part of any of the draws, reports, or application with Davenport CDBG, but she was willing to try, and she did do some of it as well.
Okay, is there a reason that position hasn't been filled?
The person left in June. We got new officers at our building in July, and he wanted to look through it with our headquarters from Peoria to see if we needed to restructure it or what we needed to do. And then that person, the officers that we have, Major Robert Dolliver, then Christmas hit with our kettle campaign, and so he's working on trying to hire someone, but we're waiting on DHQ to give us back, which is headquarters, to give us back the approval of the job description, which we have not received yet.
I'm just a little concerned that such an integral position hasn't been filled for this length of time. What responsibility do they have in administering the grant, like doing the draws or the reporting?
They have none. All they would do is help with the application for the grants. I did the rest. I did the draws and the reports. They only did that part, and the last couple of years since I've been in this position, I have done and written everything. He just uploaded and attached everything. Otherwise, it's been me.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from any other? So we have Fred?
Yeah, I was just going to say that we set the rule up pre-COVID, and nobody anticipated what was going to happen. And we set it up mainly to protect staff so that staff would be able to deal with the things as they needed to. And I would make a motion that we accept the extension and pending staff's approval.
Okay, thank you, Fred.
second that motion.
We have more. Dale, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I just have a question. Has this happened in the past, that somebody has asked for an extension and has it been granted, what percentage of the time? And
I've been here since 2009, and in that time, it happened once, that a subrecipient, now this was on paper, of course, a subrecipient was late, just briefly late, in turning in their application, and the CAC at that time did decide to accept it. My predecessor, Rita, who many of you remember fondly, had told me at that time, when we were addressing that issue, that it had happened 2 times prior to that before I arrived. And in one of those situations, the extension was granted, and in one, it was not. So that I know of, in 30 years, I think it's happened 3 times, and 2 out of the 3 of those times the extension was granted.
Okay, then I just have one, I just have one clarification of Fred's motion. The extension, is that till tomorrow night, or is that till Wednesday?
It's, if staff has no objections, to make it to Wednesday.
Thank you. We have one other question from CAC member.
Yes, I was just wondering why the application hadn't been started until 2 weeks before it's due. I mean, how long have you known it was due, or?
We had the training that Heather and John did on December 1st. December 3rd, I did look at it and was going to start working on it. I had contacted John Cameron to say that some of the stuff was not fillable. And so I was asking if they handwrite it or what we're going to do. And that got fixed. I think I was notified later on Friday, the 4th, I believe. Then on the 7th that week, I had to finish the draws that we do that I do on a monthly basis. And I assumed that the 11th until the 28th, we would be fine and we'd have plenty of time to work on it. And so that's why.
Well, and I really think there was a double whammy this year between the COVID and then the new electronic filing.
Okay. So there is, any other questions at all? There is a motion on the floor.
I'll second it.
It's been seconded by, I believe, Johnson.
Request the roll call. You have to request the roll call.
I think we probably ought to have a roll call, just so we know who's saying what where.
Okay, so I will call the roll. Gilmore? Holloway?
Yes.
Woods?
Yes.
Patel?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Kiefer?
Yes.
Hodges?
Yes.
Nolan? I'm sorry, is Nolan on the line at this moment? Okay, we'll just skip her. Johnson?
Yes.
Lord?
Yes.
Klassen?
Yes.
And Winkler?
Yes.
Okay, it's unanimous to approve an extension until Wednesday at 4:30. So Kelly and Malia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for the extension. I appreciate it.
Okay, and Dawn will get with you tomorrow, Kelly, and let you know what form to turn that in. I don't know if we'll be able to reopen the electronic system, so we're gonna have to check with purchasing on that, and Dawn will get back with you tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay,
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
everyone. Have a great night.
thank you.
It looks like Nancy Nolan has joined
Oh,
us.
great.
Yes, yes.
And Nancy, if you could introduce yourself, we would love to learn more about you.
Oh, hi. Nancy Nolan. I live in Glen Armel neighborhood, and this is my first time serving on a committee for the city. I've been involved in our neighborhood for 20 years, my husband 30, and together with the late founder, Jim Welch, we put together a recognized neighborhood called the Glen Armel Neighborhood Association. And in the last 6 years, we've even, I guess we were kind of ahead of the steps of where they were doing the individual blocks, I can't remember the name of it. I was just talking to Mary McGinnis on the phone the other day about this, where they try to get smaller blocks. We actually have a block group also. So I just wanted to extend this a little bit further in my participation with the city and to help support what's going on in our community.
Well, we thank you for your service to our community and welcome to the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
Next on the items on the agenda is a extension request from Family Resources. Heather, give us more information, please.
I know we have quite a few members who are new, so I do want to just give a little bit of background on this one. In 2017, the CAC voted to require that subrecipients request an extension if their audit was going to be late. The contract that we have with all of our subrecipients requires that their audit be turned in 6 months after the end of their fiscal year. Most of our subrecipients, their fiscal year ends on June 30th, which means that their audit is due on December 30th. And back in those days in 2017, we were had for several years problems with agencies not submitting their audits on time and sometimes not at all. And at that point, the CAC decided to take away from staff the ability to grant extensions to relieve us of that burden and put the responsibility on granting extensions in the hands of the CAC. And the way it was set up at that time was that if you knew that you were not going to make the December 30th deadline, you had to request an extension of your audit by November 1st, which the CAC would then vote on at their December meeting. And then if it was granted, then you would be granted at most a 2-week extension, which would be to January 15th. And the reason for that was that the CAC is considering new applications for the next program year in January. And the intention was that they wanted to have the audits on hand to, or at least have staff be able to review them to know if there's any issues in the audit as they're considering new applications. So that was 2017. Since then, I am pleased to say we have not had a single late audit up until this year. So audits have always been on time, and we haven't even had an agency request an extension until this year. But I think, as we all know, this is somewhat of an extraordinary year. And so, of course, there's going to be a thing that never happened before happens. So Salvation Army, just a week or two ago, there's a timeline in your I'm sorry, Family Resources, I misspoke. We were just discussing Salvation Army separately. Family Resources let Dawn know a couple weeks ago that they were not going to be able to make the audit deadline for several reasons. They've given you some information there, but Dawn, do you want to talk at all about any of their reasoning, or you feel good about it? Basically, they have a new finance director and they're working through some issues and just were thinking they were going to make it and they just didn't quite make it. So they are requesting that the CAC grant an audit extension request after the deadline. So this, according to at least practice or theoretical practice, would be that they would get an extension through January 15th at the latest, and to get their audit in. The catch to this, or the stick, I guess you would want to say, is that at the time that the CAC put in place the requirement that you had to formally request an extension, they also said if you missed the deadline, you would not be eligible to receive funding in the next program year. So essentially, the CAC has to take 2 votes tonight. One, to decide if they're going to grant the late audit extension request. And if the CAC decides not to grant that request, then they will also have to vote on whether or not Family Resources is going to be eligible to receive funding for the year that begins July 1st of 2021. And the reason for that is a timing issue. So in between November, when they should have requested their audit extension, but they didn't, and now their application for next year's funding was due, and they've already submitted it. So that's why they can't be told not to submit it because it's already here. So now the CAC has to decide how you're going to handle all that. So step one is, do you want to grant the extension? Yes or no, and through how long? And if you decide not to, then step two is you have to vote on whether or not they're eligible for funding next year.
I have
Well, I have
some,
I will go with Chad. Chad, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question. So what if we decide not to accept the audit, but we vote to let them continue on with the application? Is there any consequence or anything?
So the decision or the rule to not allow them to receive funding next year is the CAC's own rule. So the CAC can vote to change it if they choose to. HUD is not requiring that. We do have to have an audit from them at some point. And I think in their materials that they submitted, you'll see that they are not asking not to turn in the audit, they're just asking to be late. But we do have to, from an oversight perspective, we do have to maintain federal financial oversight of them, which means that we as staff have to go through their audit at some point. But it doesn't necessarily have to be, it doesn't have to be on any particular schedule at all.
Go ahead, Chris.
Basically, we are accepting the audit, but the main vote is basically whether we let them continue for funding next year, right?
I would clarify that by saying the first vote is to say, do you want to offer them an audit extension? And if you do, then you don't have to take the second vote because you're basically giving them a way to meet the rules. So they haven't violated a rule that would make them ineligible, is what I would say. So if you vote to give them the extension, there is no second vote. If you vote not to give them the extension, then they've missed a deadline, and now that has to have a second vote on whether or not they're eligible for future funding. So it's, the need for the second vote, the eligibility vote, is dependent on whether or not you grant the audit request.
and I would like to make some notes on the documents I'm looking at. It looks like they took a board vote on December 16th, which is the date of their letter, but yet the actual request was not received by the city for yet another week. And when I look and read their accountant's letter, I'm concerned because at the end of it, it says if the committee requires the federal single audit, an extension beyond January 15th is expected. So I'm real concerned with the lack of compliance.
I mean, I don't have really a response for that except to say that the city or the CAC can, the January 15th deadline is our deadline. It's not HUD's deadline. HUD is saying you have to look at the audit at some point. HUD isn't saying January 15th is the date at which you have to look at it. So they won't be in violation of any HUD rules. They will just be in violation of CAC's rules, which it's CAC's decision if they want to allow that or not. And that would go for both extensions up to January 15th and also extensions beyond it if the CAC was so inclined. I'm reflecting back now to before we had this rule, back in the CAC established this rule in 2017, and before that, they were supposed to have their audits to us by December 30th, and that was our preference, but many of them were late, and many of them were late every single year, the same ones. And so at that time, it was, you got an extension, but no matter what, you had to have it in before the CAC voted on funding for the next year. So in that sense, the old rule, if you want to call it that, used to be as long as you had your audit in by March, you were fine, even though you were technically in violation. And I think what the CAC did in 2017 is just to formalize that and shorten it. So again, the January 15th deadline isn't set by HUD, it's a CAC deadline that they set in 2017.
But when I read the letter from Family Resources, they state in there categorically that they will submit an audit no later than January 15th. But then I look and see their accountant saying that, you know, if it's a single audit, we can expect for another extension. And I just have a problem with it.
And I think one way for the CAC to think about it, if they chose, is, I mean, just as a late extension is being considered at this time, the CAC could decide you have to have it in by January 15th, and if they say, no, that's not enough time, then reconsider it again in February and decide if you want to grant another extension. I mean, that would be one way to go about it. Or in the vote at this time, make it categorical. It must be in at January 15th. No further extensions will be given. You could box yourself. I mean, you could do that if you chose to as well. Again, these aren't HUD's requirements. They're just how you all as a body want to handle it.
We have another question, Mr. Wood.
My question is to the staff. Now, we've okayed Salvation Army to extend, and we've talked to the staff to see if they can handle it. If we extend Family Resources, is the staff still able to handle it, or are we overworking the staff?
Do you want it, or? I wouldn't say that it's not a matter of overwork. I mean, it's something that we look at for every single applicant. It's just a matter of when we look at it. I think one of the main reasons that we ask for and review an audit is to see, are there any big issues that you're having as an agency that could impact your agency's financial health separate from CDBG? Because what we've seen in the past with some agencies is CDBG can be going fine, everything perfect in CDBG, because we as staff monitor it very closely. But you as an agency don't just do this narrow thing. You do all these other things. And the bigger an agency you are, the more things you do. And things could be going very wrong over here, but because for most of the year, all we do is look at CDBG, we wouldn't know if some other issue was happening over here. So the audit every year is just our chance to say, as a whole, what is your agency's financial health? And I think that's important. And I think we need to see it at some point. I wouldn't say it's a matter of overwork. It's more just a matter of timing. What I will say too, one thing that's different from now from what was the case in 2017 is we have really beefed up our application since then. So as we mentioned, Family Resources has since submitted their application, and they've submitted quite a few materials more about finances than we used to get back then, because there's been a lot of changes since then, both into federal rules and into what we as staff need to see. So what I would say is there's quite a bit of financial information in our application. We get the board financial reports. We ask to see monitoring letters if they have any other federal funding or any issues or findings that they've had. So I think we have a good idea of what's going on based on their application, even without their audit. But at some point in the game, we do need to see the audit. The date at which we see it isn't too important to staff, I wouldn't say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any additional questions at all? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. This is Chris Miller. I'll make a motion to extend to January 15th with no further extensions beyond that.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Hi, whoever's puppy is on the line.
Okay, I guess we do, Fred?
Yeah, I've got a question on the accountant's statement. Why are they saying that thing about the federal single audit? What is that all about? I don't get it.
So a federal single audit is required for any agency that receives over $750,000 in federal funding in any fiscal year. So any agency that hits that threshold is going to require a single audit, and a single audit is a lot more work than a regular audit. At this stage, I would say Family Resources is probably the only one among our subrecipients that would ever trigger that $750,000 single audit threshold, just because, as we said, the bigger of an agency you do, the more things you do, the more likely you are to trigger that requirement. So I would say that would be an unusual thing. The other thing I would say is that with COVID and the CARES Act, there are a lot of agencies getting a lot more federal money than they had planned on. And there may be other agencies that trip that threshold and we just don't yet know it. So I think that's what a single audit is, and it's just a higher bar, a more intensive look at your finances because you're taking so much federal money is what a single audit is.
Okay, I understand that a little better now, thank you. My point would be that if that is triggered and tripped, then at that point, we would still be able to decide whether or not we were going to extend it again. I mean, even though it says, we've already said once we weren't going to take it, now we're saying we are. So that would be available to us at that time?
I think, the wording is up to you as a body. So it just really depends on what message you want to send. But, again, the only inflexible rules are HUD's rules. Any rules we set for ourselves can be changed.
I understand. What I've got a problem with is, I guess his phrasing, the accountant's phrasing with is expected, like you will have to give us more time. And no, we don't have to. And I think, I'm fine with the motion. I'm fine with all of that, but I think that's something that we would consider at that time as, because it's something that comes up out of the blue, but I don't think it's up to him to tell us that. And if we vote for this, I would like staff to kind of make that clear to him.
Okay.
Thank you.
We can, I think, deliver that message.
Heather, I have a question.
Yes.
Is there anything that we are requiring from them that would trigger a federal single audit?
It's just the threshold of money.
Okay.
So our CDBG, they get about 30,000 from us. So our CDBG alone is not triggering that $750,000 limit. It's the total of all the federal money of all the various kinds that you get. It doesn't matter the source of it. It's just if it's federal and you get it and it totals more than 750, you have to do a single audit. And that's nationwide. That's not just specific to us.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor, and the motion is to extend the deadline to January 15th and no longer. Is that correct?
Yes.
I guess we.
Do you want to put in that motion that if it's not received by the 15th, that they will not be considered for a grant next year, or not?
That's up to you. You would need to propose an amendment to Chris's motion, and she and her second would both need to accept that amendment.
I propose that change.
This is Woods. I'll agree to it. I agree to the change.
That if their audit is not completed and turned in by the 15th, that their application for this year will not be looked at by us.
I would agree with that.
Like Reagan has a question.
I would like to comment. I guess I would say I have a hard time putting that hard demand on them and saying then in that case you won't be considered for next year, just because the reason they went over the threshold is because they received extra money this year due to COVID that they weren't planning on. And it also says that in the letter from the accountant that official guidance on how to audit those funds is still being finalized by the federal government. So they are, as we are, at hand and, of waiting for that information to figure out whether or not that's what they need to do or not. And they're looking out for the best interest of their organization in order to do so. So I think it would be unfortunate on our part to put that high demand on and say that if you don't give it to us by the 15th, we're not even going to consider you. I think that would be a bad move. Just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Reagan.
Can
We'll have Fred and then we'll have Joe.
Okay, my point would be that instead of the hard and fast, I can't vote for that. Instead of the hard and fast, I could vote for an amendment that says they must notify us by the 15th if there is a problem. Just say, it's not their fault, they got extra money from the government. It's something that comes up, and that could happen to any of our recipients. Most of them aren't in a position where they're gonna get 750, but it could happen to anybody, and to just say, and if it comes in on February 16th, and then they say, wait a minute, we gotta go back and do a federal single audit or something, or it comes in on the 14th, I don't think it's right for us to just say out in front that if that happens, if you get extra money, you're done with us. That's my position.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, I kind of like the 15th deadline, but instead of making it hard, if they miss it or for some reason they can't finish the audit by then, which I find a little ridiculous because the auditor, the firm does have people, extra people that they can put on if they have a shortened deadline. But my point is, if for some reason they can't meet the 15th, we're not cutting them off, but they must reapply for next year.
I would like to interject. I think the motion that we had on the table saying that we are extending it to January 15th, January 15th is the date we're extending it to. And so that is the date that we're saying, that is the threshold that we're asking them to meet. And I think it would be fair to just say, have it in by January 15th. And I think that sends a clear signal to them that this is the date. And if they don't, they have, I'm glad they have so many, funds coming in, but maybe CPG won't be the funds for this year. I just think, I don't think we need to be threatening. That's just my opinion. I think we set the date, we put the date out there, they either gonna meet it or not. I'm open to.
What happens if they don't?
What happens if they don't? I think that's a fair question, Chad. I think that means that they don't get the funds for this upcoming year. I think Nancy, you have
That's
something.
basically the motion then.
I think at the beginning we.
Actually, guys, I want to have Nancy. Nancy is going to be next. Okay.
Hi, I'm reading that letter about, for CAG, the audit extension requirements. I mean, this was written in 2017, where we had January 15th of a given year. There's a lot of different things going on now in 2021 and 2020 that no one saw when they drafted this for the January 15th deadline. When that decision was made, that would be a simpler situation at that time. But none of us have been prepared for what's going on. I guess I feel, as Reagan does, being a little bit lenient for these nonprofit people. They have to grapple for funding to keep the thing afloat. And whether or not they got extra funding from the government shouldn't be their fault. They're still having to untangle all the moving parts of that as well. COVID has not been kind to us, or Derecho, or anything else that's been going on. Political, public funding, pandemics. I guess I err on the side of a little bit of compassion here, that we just ask for communication by a certain time if it can't be met. That is transparency and communication is so important. That if these organizations can meet that, at least they're trying. So that's my 2 cents, because that January 15th was designed back in 2017 when we didn't have all of these major catastrophes going on in life. It wasn't designed, it was designed for the normal flow of business.
Thank you, Nancy. I would like to give it to staff.
As I'm looking at the calendar, I just, the thought occurred to me. This is Heather, for those that I don't know, can't see me. But, today is the 4th. Whatever decision the CAC makes would be conveyed to Family Resources tomorrow, which is the 5th. And the audit, if we go that direction, would be due the 15th. So that would essentially give 9 working days, to get the audit, in, which is through no fault of this organization's. I mean, they gave us the request late, would give them 9 working days to get the audit in. The CAC does not meet again until February 1st, so there's 2 additional weeks in January that, in theory, the audit would be coming in and staff, would look at it. So one thing to consider if the CAC wanted to go this direction is that you could say you would extend it to the 22nd, which gives them a little bit more time to get it in. Still gives staff a week to look at it if they do get it in by the 22nd before the February 1st meeting. And then if they don't, then at the February 1st meeting, you would, as a body, basically meet again and decide what you wanted to do at that time. That might be one possible solution.
I agree with that, Heather. I can amend my motion to give them an extension to January 22nd with no further extension.
And then Chad.
Hey, this is Tam.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, this is Tammy Ward. I kind of have a problem with this. We're going to extend with no extension. If I understand correctly, this is because of COVID funding that they got, and now the federal government is directing an audit. And for somebody who worked for the federal government and worked with this CARE when it came in with contractors, the federal government changes their mind like every half hour. So if you think that they've got this all in place and they're going to get this audit done by the end of January, it isn't going to happen because the federal government probably still hasn't decided how they're going to audit that. So I think we need to give them a break, and this committee does not trump the federal government. So the federal government is going to tell them, and they're not going to say, oh, we got to hurry this up because the CDC in Davenport, Iowa says that they got to have theirs in by the 22nd of January. So I think we need to give them a break.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
My main issue, this is Wood speaking.
Okay.
I think you have to push your talk button, sir.
How's that?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Hit the wrong side of it. This is Woods, and my main issue is that, whatever we do agree on, we've got to stipulate that the change was due to COVID issues. Otherwise, this stuff is going to happen year after year after year, and you're right back to where it was before. Mm-hmm. So whatever we do decide, put a footnote in there that it is due to COVID issues, please.
Okay.
Fred?
Yeah, Tammy, this is Fred. The federal government audit doesn't come into play unless they get $750,000. That would be the second extension they would request, if I understand that correctly. This is the first extension just to finish the audit that we requested. But they said that if they have to go to a single federal audit, then it would take even longer, is what they've said. We're not even looking at that at this point. This point is just to decide if we're going to, yes.
I just want to clarify that the audit is either or. Either you do a regular financial audit, or if you trip the trigger, you go into a single audit. It's
Right.
not, you wouldn't complete one and then do the other.
Right, and the one we're asking for is not the one with the trigger tripped at this time. I mean, that's not our request. That's a federal government request if they hit 750, which they have not yet, to our knowledge.
I think we don't know. I think the question to them would be, I think the question to them would be, did you already trigger a single audit in the prior year or in the current, or did you just do it for the first time this year? That to me would be a pertinent
Well,
question.
we
to
don't even
ask.
know if they have, do we? Do we know that they
I
have?
think those are
that's
questions
a
we
good
can
question.
ask.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
these are things we'd have
Yeah.
to start with.
So I think if, my proposal would be, whatever date, if the group is so inclined to, extend to some date, and I'm hearing kind of a consensus there is, it's just a matter of how long, that what we could do is say, this is the date, we expect it in by that date, and here are questions we have regarding, your situation, and we could ask them, did you have a single audit in a prior year? When did you become aware that you needed to have a single audit in? We could ask some other questions that.
Or
if
just
they
simply,
did-
do you anticipate a single
Right.
audit? I
And-
mean, all that other stuff, yeah.
Correct, and then that way, if whatever date you give them, they don't make it, then you have more information upon which to make the next decision if you have to make a next decision.
Yeah, and I agree with saying that the extensions we're giving are stipulated by COVID. I agree with that. That's a good idea.
Okay,
But if we're going to make these changes, we have to start by withdrawing the second and the second amendment, I believe.
I would propose that if we're gonna change this dramatically.
Or vote on it.
The current offers of the motion and the second would withdraw it and just offer a new one, because I think we've just put on too
But
many
you have
amendments
to
here.
start with the amendments first and get those cleared.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then- And
so
then
Chad
go,
would-
then
Chad-
go to the motion and rephrase
Yeah,
it.
Chad would withdraw his amendment, and then Chris would, and whoever her second was, would either amend their existing motion or withdraw their existing motion and make a new one. That would be the procedure.
So Chris is now going to propose,
Well, first Chad would need to withdraw his amendment to Chris's motion, if he's so inclined.
I guess, I'm still kind of in favor of it, but
Or we can just add amendments onto, I think we have to vote on something, and then move on to whatever, either withdraw what we have and make something new, or vote on what we have and see where it comes out. Because, I think that's just where we're at.
and so can we just have a review of the motion as it stands currently? So we start with,
We have to start with the amendments, I
Okay.
think,
You
and
just
then
want
we
it
get
read
to.
back, right? though?
yeah, I just
You're
want to read
looking for
back.
it read
Yeah, I just
back.
want to read back
Right,
so everyone's
absolutely.
clear on what we are
Okay.
talking about.
Okay, so, if I'm understanding Chris and Chad correctly, the motion is to grant an extension through January 15th with no further extensions. And Chad's amendment was to say that if they do not meet this deadline, they would not get funding for, the next year. Am I understanding that correctly, Chris and Chad?
yes.
Okay. Okay, so as a group, we either need to vote on what's on the floor or withdraw it and propose something new.
I say do we vote on the amendment as is and see where it comes out at? Let's call for a roll call vote.
Okay.
Can we, discussion? Or-
Do you want to call for final discussion then?
Yeah, we'll call for it.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, my last comment on that is just, I really feel like they should be two separate votes. One should be for the extension, one should be for eligibility of the following year. So that tells you how I'm gonna vote if the amendment is not withdrawn.
That's fine by me if you want to do it that way.
To do it as two separate?
You have to, we're doing it separate because we're going to vote the amendment, which is to end it, period. And then the other
Unless
one.
Chad just withdraws his amendment, then we could just vote on the
We're
extension date.
voting on the amendment first. As I understand it, we're voting on the amendment that they only get to the 15th and that's it. We vote on that first. We don't need to discuss anything else at this point.
I think, I mean,
So Chad has agreed to withdraw his
okay, I
amendment.
didn't hear that
Is that
part,
correct,
sorry.
Chad?
Yes, if it's two separate votes, that's fine, whatever.
So Chad has agreed to withdraw his amendment. We will vote on the January 15th deadline. I don't think that.
Well, just a
second was-
minute, because could I amend my original to change the date from the 15th to the 22nd to give them more time.
And Dave, you were the second. Do you agree to that amendment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay.
So we are voting to have the deadline extended to January 22nd.
Yeah.
That is the amendment that we're voting on
Yes.
right now.
The current language, Chris amended it and David accepted the amendment, is to extend to January 22nd with no further extensions. That's Chris's motion. Chad withdrew his amendment.
So we call for a roll call vote.
Okay. You need a discussion? Okay.
Yeah, my problem with that is to say no further extensions when things could come up. I mean, they could get that federal trigger tripped and they don't know. I mean, that's why I'm gonna have to say no.
And just to clarify, if the amendment is voted down, then we would entertain another.
Yeah,
Motion,
you
correct?
can always
Okay.
make other motions. If the motion, if any motion fails, you can always make another motion and vote on that one.
Okay, so this to accept, I just want to read it. What, will you please read it clearly?
Yep, so the current motion that is being voted upon is to offer Family Resources an extension for their audit through January 22nd with no further extensions.
Okay.
And are you, one more.
Dale?
Well, I don't think that we need to make a decision until February 1st if there's an extension. If we would grant them another extension. I'm thinking that, no, I kind of, with the exception of extenuating circumstances, I don't want to extend it past the 22nd of January.
Okay.
But things could there could be deaths, there could be fires, there could be all sorts of natural disasters that would, I think that if we wait until February, if we tell them that January 22nd is the final date, that we will accept it. And if they don't, then I think February 1st, we can make another decision that if there were pending extenuating circumstances, that we can review it again. I don't think that we need to make that decision now.
Okay, the motion is, any other discussion items? I don't see any hands on the screen. Mr. Woods?
I'm just disagreeing with that part because I still figure, hey, the 22nd gives them plenty of time. And if we leave it open like we're doing for the past there, we're opening up Pandora's box for years after this. So fire, pestilence or whatever, 22nd should give them plenty of time to get their stuff in.
Okay, I have Dale and I also have Fred. I had one question. So if the current motion is voted down because of the no more extensions, then someone can make another motion that removes those no more extensions, correct? All right, Fred, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, again, I gotta vote for okay, we don't know what's gonna happen between now and February 22nd. January 22nd, January 1st, February 1st. We don't know what's gonna happen. And to say that we're gonna give them an extension to the 22nd and then no chance for anything past that doesn't work for me. To say we're gonna give them an extension to January 22nd, period, I'm okay with that. But I'm not okay with saying, and nothing past that, because we don't know what can happen. I can't tell the future. I don't know. Maybe they'll get that government, hit that government trip, whatever. But I'm not okay with saying no further extension, because we don't know.
Okay.
If I was gonna vote against an extension, it would be this one.
Okay. So this one, the currently one, as it states, does have the and no further extensions, correct?
Yep, it says through January 22nd with no further extension is the current language.
Okay.
Unless amended
Okay,
or,
Go ahead. So I'm not seeing who is talking on the screen.
Reagan has one more. Oh, go ahead, caller. I think that's.
Your caller
This is Tammy
too.
Lord. I guess I'm confused. I thought we don't know which audit they're going to have.
We don't.
I think that's what they're saying in their letter. Their auditor is saying,
I
if,
guess why-
so let me read the letter. The letter says they did receive 750,000, which requires a single audit in accordance with, government regulations. Because they received COVID money, which we talked about, that put them kind of over the line. And what they're saying is the guidance on how to audit these new federal COVID dollars is not out. And so that's what they're saying in their letter, is they are triggering a single audit. Part of that money is COVID money, and they don't have guidance on how to do a single audit on COVID money yet.
Okay, and I will bet you money that come the end of January, they're still not gonna have guidance on that.
Yeah. And I can say, I mean, just anecdotally, let me just say, obviously, we don't know exactly the circumstances of Family Resources, but we as staff are receiving the CARES Act dollars, and I do have to concur with Tammy's assessment that the rules are not written for it. They're basically launched a program and they're still deciding the rules as they go because the situation is so fluid.
Yeah.
So I can agree with that part, is that the COVID money definitely throws a wrench into things. I can occur with that.
So this letter, I'm reading it, I'm sorry. This letter states that they will have.
January and then assess it at that time.
Can you repeat that, Tammy? I'm sorry.
I think we should just give them an extension to 22nd January and then assess it at that time if they're not able to get it in before then.
Okay.
But
Just
on
one comment also.
Go ahead, Chad.
On
Chad,
the
go-
last-
Chad, then Chris, please.
I just have one comment also. If this was so important to them, why didn't they have someone join this meeting like Salvation Army did,
And I wanna be
clarify
clear-
any questions we had on this.
I want to be very clear about that. We did not ask them to attend this meeting. Salvation Army offered to attend, and there are no rules written for how Salvation Army, how a late application is supposed to be handled. And so Salvation Army offered to attend, and we accepted that offer. On the other hand, Family Resources, there were rules written of what to do if you're requesting an audit extension request, and we told them to follow that. And those rules do not say appear before the CAC. So I think that's why they didn't. They were just following the rules that were written. So I don't want to send the message that they should or could have been here. We never told them they could, and they never offered. It just simply never came up. And I think that's because they were just following the procedure as written for an extension request.
Okay, Chris?
Okay. The final line of the accountant's letter says, if the committee requires the federal single audit, are we requiring it? Because it looks to me like if we say, no, you can give us a regular audit, that they should be able to comply.
I don't think we get to decide whether they have a single audit or not. That's beyond us. Whatever audit they get is the audit we need. Okay. So we aren't saying do this kind of audit or that kind of audit. We just say the audit you do, we need a copy of that audit, and this is when it's supposed to be to us by. So, I wouldn't maybe read too much into that, just because I don't know. I mean, you never know what story the accountant's getting either from, we're playing a game of telephone now because it's, staff talking to Family Resources staff, talking to their auditor who's writing stuff down. So I don't know. All I can tell you is that their contract says whatever audit you get, we don't care what kind of audit it is, you have to give it to us.
Fred had a
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it does appear that they have tripped the 750. Yes. And it does appear that they're saying that if we require it, but if we don't require it, they can meet that deadline. That's fine. What I would suggest, and again, the motion that's out there, I can't go with, but what I would suggest is something to the effect that they supply us with a normal audit. And then if a federal single audit is developed in addition to that, then they supply us with that at that time.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was getting at, Fred.
So you're looking for an extension to January 22nd of just a regular audit, and if they don't get the single audit in by then, that's okay?
No?
Oh, okay. I think,
I think we got to vote on the,
Yeah,
on the motion that's out there, have it restated, vote on it up or down, and then we can go with the rest of it.
yes.
So
Can I just
again,
ask one quick question?
good, Reagan. I can't see.
Last statement, but tell me again the date, Heather, that you guys, according to HUD guidelines, have to review their audit?
HUD does not establish a date. They just say that we, as the city, have to have good financial oversight of our subrecipients, and that includes looking at their audits, but it does not give a solid date.
It doesn't say you have to look at it by, within
No.
that year. and
The-
like that. Okay.
The dates that are included are, we say they have to get it to us by 6 months after the end of their fiscal year. That's just because that's kind of a standard time frame, and that's in their contract. And that's the only date, but it's a date that, I mean, the city at some point when we developed that contract with our legal team decided upon, but it's not a HUD date.
I would like to call the question.
Yeah,
I would just like to call the question and just
Okay.
take an up or down vote, if that's okay?
yep, that's fine. So the motion on the floor, and I'll do the roll call, is to extend through January 22nd with no further extensions. So, I will call the roll. Gilmore,
No.
Holloway,
No.
Woods,
Yes,
Patel,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Hodges,
No.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Nolan, we might have lost Nolan.
No, she's still
Oh,
there.
I'm sorry.
She's getting there.
Sorry,
Oh.
I was contemplating.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I'm voting no.
Okay. Johnson,
I still had one more question, but I guess I will vote yes.
Lord,
No.
Klassen,
No,
and Winkler.
No.
Six noes. 1, 2, 3, 4. What do you have? Over here.
Okay. I think it was a few more no's, I think. Yeah.
So the noes have it. The noes have it. Okay.
I would make a motion
Yep, so
that we give Family Resources an extension until January 22nd. And that's all I want to say on the motion, that they have the extension until January 22nd due to COVID.
Second.
okay. I have one.
Who seconded?
Dale.
Dale, okay. Okay,
I would like to see if we could ask a question to see, could they provide a normal audit?
okay,
Just ask the question,
okay.
and then that way we'll have better information, as what their time frame is.
Okay.
Anybody else? I can't see Reagan, if, with the calendar.
I'm here.
Okay.
So my question in regards to all of this is, because as you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we already received their application for year 47
Correct.
prior to them asking for this extension. So we have to still deal with that application. So in my mind, us voting on this extension really has no repercussion to them until we take the next vote.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay,
So we have a motion and a second on the floor. Guess we go call the roll call. Any other discussion at all?
okay. Just so that everybody's clear, the motion that we are voting on is to extend the audit deadline for Family Resources through January 22nd due to COVID.
Okay.
All right. Ready? Okay. Let me just write that down. Okay, Gilmore.
Yes.
Holloway.
Yes.
Woods.
Yes.
Patel.
Yes.
Miller.
No.
Kiefer.
No.
Hodges.
Yes.
Nolan.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Lord.
Yes.
Klassen.
Yes.
Winkler.
Yes.
The yeses have it.
I would like to commend the Committee on some spirited debate. These questions are important. People are, this money is our responsibility, and it's okay to have some dissenting votes and some dissenting views because we're here to take care of the people's money. So I'd like to commend the entire committee on the debate today. Action item. Reprogramming of year 45 funds to year 46.
Okay. So again, this is a little bit of a departure from our standard operating procedure due to COVID again. For those members who've been around a little bit, there'll be some new pieces in here, and I know we have quite a few new members, so I just want to briefly explain again what reprogramming is. So each year, the city enters subrecipient agreements with nonprofit agencies and city departments that deliver CDBG eligible programs. And those are one-year agreements for the most part. And when June 30th comes, if there are any funds that are unspent and unobligated, those funds come back and become available for reprogramming. And reprogramming is funds from a prior year that become available in the current year to be used for activities generally that are already funded. So in a normal year, a non-COVID year, we would not be able to make reprogramming funds available to our public service agencies because that category of funding is capped by HUD. You can only spend so much money on the public services. And simply having money available from a prior year does not lift the cap in the current year. So we've already funded to this year's cap. We can't put last year's money in and count it towards the cap. It's already met. So that would be a normal year. Now COVID comes along. And HUD issued quite a few waivers that make it easier for public service agencies to deliver their programs because the public service agencies are the ones who are really on the front lines of dealing with a lot of the community needs of our low-income residents due to COVID. So these are, the programs that we already fund, such as youth programs, senior programs, homeless programs, domestic violence programs. All of these things are already funded by CDBG, but many of them are seeing increased costs or increased demands due to COVID. And recognizing that, HUD issued some waivers that for COVID-related expenses only can be counted outside of the public service cap. So we've already met our public service cap for the year. We have reprogramming funds available from a prior year, and HUD says we can use that money to meet public service needs if they are directly related to COVID and not be in violation of the cap. So in light of those waivers, we made notification to our nonprofit groups that there was funding available for certain expenses, and they were given several weeks to submit some requests. And you see the request there. We have a request from Big Brothers Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club, and Project Renewal. So those were the only requests we received from our currently funded subrecipients through the deadline. We have about $41,000 available for reprogramming from the prior year, and the requests that we received in total did not account for all of that reprogrammable funds. So basically, we didn't receive enough requests to use up all the reprogramming. The flip side of that is that in our reporting system for HUD, all of the money has to be assigned to something. You have to plug the dollars into somewhere. They can't just sit out there not assigned to anything. And so in order to meet the requirement that we have the money assigned to something, and also recognizing that nonprofits are under a lot of strain right now, and there's a lot of needs out there that either they didn't think to submit to us, or there are needs that they don't know that they have yet that are still coming. The city has requested that the remainder of the reprogramming money be set aside into a public service COVID set aside, and this is new for us. We haven't typically asked for set asides. HUD doesn't prevent it, but typically through our application process, set asides aren't necessary because we get enough applications to speak for the money and more, so we don't have to kind of like set aside pots for future use. But in this case, we do have the reprogrammable funds available, and we do know that there's nonprofits out there with needs that they just maybe didn't have the time or the energy or even the knowledge of what their needs are that might be eligible to put in a request. And so for that reason, we've requested the set aside. It'll enable the city to fund public service COVID-related requests. It's only for COVID-related requests. It's not for just anything that any nonprofit somewhere might want. It has to meet all the regular HUD requirements plus these this very narrow category of COVID-related to get the waiver. So then that would enable us to meet those needs on a more ongoing and quicker basis, rather than doing another round of reprogramming and having to come back in a month or 2 months and request from the CAC again the ability to use reprogramming towards those same eligible activities. Because I do want to recognize that, first of all, it's already January and the program year ends in June. So depending on the time frame of a request, it wouldn't leave them very much time to use the money. So it would just enable us to work a little quicker and meet those needs a little quicker, while also meeting HUD's requirements that we kind of assign all of the money. So those are the requests that we received. And what the CAC will need to do is you'll take 2 votes. One, you have to vote to decide to basically declare that the requests are eligible, and then a second vote to recommend an amount, if any, for the reprogramming requests that you have received.
I move that we accept the organizations that have been requested. I move we consider them eligible to receive money.
I second.
Yeah.
Been motion and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 And all those opposed? Okay, seeing none. Motion passes.
I further move that we accept the recommendations from staff on the redistribution of the what?
I would just like to clarify that they're not recommendations from staff.
Oh,
They're
okay.
requests from.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. I further move that we accept the requests of these organizations in the amount that they requested.
I have some questions.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. On the request from Ruth, it appears to me to be very vague. Is there an actual program? Do they get contacted by nonprofits?
I think his thinking, so there have been several times throughout the pandemic where there have been one need or another that has popped up. One that comes to mind is warming centers. A lot of the normal ones have not opened because of COVID, and so there was briefly a scramble to find some. Another that comes to mind was meals for people who normally would be in homeless shelters where meals are provided, but now are being housed in hotels, and obviously you don't have cooking facilities there, so meals have to be brought to them. So throughout the pandemic, there have been various requests that have popped up, And, you know, CDBG is not a fast-moving grant usually. So we could say, okay, well, we'll look into that and try to see if we can, you know, reallocate some money, but the needs are quite emergent. And so by the time CAC or CDBG would be able to like be remobilized to meet that, the need is either already funded with something else, or maybe the need has diminished and isn't there anymore. So there have been requests that have popped up and then kind of, you know, disappeared. We don't, that I know of, have a specific program in mind that we know right now has a need, but I can tell you probably every week or every other week since this has started, something has come up and that they've said, well, why can't CDBG pay for this? And unfortunately, our answer always has to be, because number one, it's all assigned to someone. Like, we would have to take money from something else and give it to this other thing, and it's hard to go and take money from something else, you know, from another agency. So this kind of allows us to have some funding that could be moved around within the same category of activities that we're already doing without having to take money from somebody else to do it.
I had a question as well. So the money that was set aside, would be like for any nonprofit organization that met the qualifications and guidelines and had a COVID-19 related?
That would meet CDBG requirements, I would imagine, yes. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. And then what would be the process? So they would come to,
They would have to make a request, just like, you know, any other applicants. My expectation is it would be an abbreviated type of application that would be evaluated, you know, based on, you know, eligibility, availability of funds, and of course, it has to serve Davenport residents who are low and moderate income, so it still has to meet all the CDBG national objectives. And then the agency itself would have to meet the same subrecipient requirements that all of our subrecipients do. So, you know, I would expect that these probably wouldn't be very small agencies. It would probably be agencies that we've either already have a relationship with or are pretty well developed, because as we know with the federal requirements, they have to have a lot of policies and procedures. They have to have a certain board structure that they would need to meet those requirements. But would I say that they have to be current subrecipients? Not the way the request is written. It wouldn't say that they would have to be. Although if the CAC wanted to limit it that way, they certainly could.
okay.
I had a second question. How is CPED going to advertise the availability of this money? And the reason I'm asking is because the money that they have in the coffers is so huge and it isn't being spent. If I agree to them getting another 25,000, I guess I'm looking for some kind of assurance that it's really going to be spent.
Well, first I would say that this request would not go into either of the two revolving loan funds. Those are standalone and are not for public services. So those are our housing rehab and our economic development funds, which do have balances. This would be a separate standalone just for nonprofit public services. So not the housing or the economic development activities, which, you know, you are correct that there is money already to address those. So this would be just for the public services. And I can tell you, Bruce did direct us to create a survey for nonprofit organizations and other stakeholders. And we did send that survey out starting today was the first day of the survey actually. And so we have the survey out and we're hoping to get some guidance from that survey of what the needs are, which could help direct us to determine what the needs are that this money could go and meet.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? There is a motion on the floor.
We don't have a second.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Was that Reagan?
Reagan.
Yep.
Thank you.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
Question? I got a question,
Yes.
Mark. That money does have to be spent within this year's time frame. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would, I mean, just like anything else, if it doesn't get spent by the end of this year, it would go into reprogramming for next year.
Okay.
We don't lose access
And
to
by-
it, is what I mean to say.
And by this year, you mean June?
Yes, fiscal year, June 30th.
Got it.
All right, next item is year 47 applications, work sessions, and presentation meetings.
Okay, so, year 47 applications, they were due on the 29th of December. We did receive applications from all of our existing subrecipients. You considered Salvation Army earlier, and they will be included in that group with their extension. We didn't receive any applications from any new agencies. We did have several inquiries, and we did have several new agencies attend our application workshop, but they ultimately decided for one reason or another to not apply. That's kind of a perennial issue.
Yeah.
So those are the applications. So you, as a group, have a choice. We did go through an electronic system this year because of COVID and not wanting to have everybody running around with a whole lot of paper. We can email you the PDFs of everybody's applications for your own review. We know that's a lot of paper to print, so we do have some printed copies if you would prefer to look at them on paper. Those of you who are here today, they're on the conference table. You can grab them as you leave if you choose. Those of you who aren't with us in person, if you would like a paper copy, just email us and let us know, and we can give them to you. But otherwise, if we don't hear from you that you want a paper copy, we'll just send you the electronic, and you can review them that way. So that's how the applications will be available to you. Those of you who've been on the committee before, you'll notice you won't get a binder this year. We don't want you to have a binder. We don't want you to return it to us, just in light of all the stuff this year. We don't want touching. So we're giving you clipped packets, binder clipped packets, and once you're done with them, you can recycle them yourselves or whatever you want. But there's no binder that you have to give back to us this year if you decide to do the paper copy. With that said, we have a lot of new members, so I just want to let you know that we typically would have a work session in January. This is not mandatory. It is an option for CAC to get together and review applications and generate questions, which we then send to the applicants. In light of COVID, I don't know that an in-person workshop is probably the wisest. We did only have 4 members join us in person tonight, so I think if there's an appetite for a workshop, it would be a virtual workshop this year. Also, I had requested the meeting room that we usually would use over at the police station, and they had indicated that they aren't doing public meetings right now because of COVID. So we would need to hold it, I think, if we were going to have it over here in City Council. So that's our option for work session. Virtual, if you want to have it at all, or some combination of virtual and in person.
Okay, Fred?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you decide you need a bigger place to hold it or something like that, I can probably get you into a building at the fairgrounds.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, just let me know.
Okay. Yeah, the group will just tell me if you want to have one at all, and if you do, we'll have it virtually and venue to be determined later, depending on how many people want to attend it in person.
I would like to have at least a virtual workshop. I think we just need to, again, we're spreading the word, but we also need to give people some tools to make sure that they can navigate this process, which I think is a very easy process, but I think people just hear federal money and get a little nervous, so I think it'd be good to.
And I do, just to make sure that I'm understanding, the workshop that we are proposing would be, I mean, it's a public meeting, as all of our meetings are public, but it's an application, it's a workshop for the CAC members to review the application.
Okay.
And ask questions to the agencies, not in
Okay.
person,
Not-
they would,
okay.
these would be written questions that you would develop and we would send out. For those of you who've done it before, you remember that. So we can have the virtual workshop. I did include the date in your packet, we do already have the date reserved. If you choose to do it, it's January 19th. It'll be Tuesday, January 19th at 6 p.m. Virtual and perhaps in person, depending on who wants to come in person, venue to be named later. So it sounds like we're in agreement that that will happen then.
Do we want to take a vote on that, or do we want to just say?
It's not typically a voting
Okay.
item, it's more of a consensus, I suppose, if anybody had strong feelings one way or the other.
Heather, could you resend that information?
Yes, I will send it out. We'll send it out tomorrow.
Thank you.
And then that leads us to, having solved the work session issue, the presentation issue. So for our new members, so our application process includes what would typically be in-person presentations from our applicants, who would typically come here and make a presentation to CAC about their application and how they were going to use the money. Obviously, with our capacity restrictions, in-person presentations from a number of different agencies are probably not on the agenda this year. I mean, February 1st is not that far away, so I can't imagine that things will have changed dramatically by then. So my recommendation would be that we do virtual presentations, just as Salvation Army presented to us tonight, their request. I would propose that we do virtual presentations. And I can tell you, I attend several meetings, online meetings with all of these agencies, and they do all have the capacity to do virtual. I've been there with them. Though if any of the agencies didn't, we could make a facility available for them to do it here at City Hall. So just to make sure that's not an obstacle to anybody. And then the date of that, typically the CAC would decide if you wanted to do 1 or 2 nights of presentations, depending upon how many applications are received. The same number of applications were received this year as were received last year, and last year it was done in 1 night. And certainly with regards to COVID, I think 1 night of presentation logistically would be much easier. So our recommendation would be that we have our presentations on 1 night, which would be February 1st. And again, that would be at 6 p.m. For those members who want to attend in person, they would come here to council chambers, same procedure as we use tonight, where there would be a limitation on the in-person members, and the rest would call in or video in, as the case may be. So unless there's strong objections to any of that, I suppose we will just plan then on 1 night. If there's any discussion there.
Do we have the ability to videotape those, all that stuff and have it online too, in case somebody misses the virtual,
Yep.
but then they can go back and
Yes.
see what was done in the workshop?
Yes.
Good idea.
Thank you.
And February 1st is the night of our regular meeting.
Yes, it would be our regular meeting. It would just have presentations first and then our regular business after. So if there were any regular, I mean, we would do our minutes and our financial report, and then if there were any other business that needed to be addressed, we would address it after the presentations. Okay, so I
At the
guess,
work session, will there be a report card?
yes, we're working on that now. We typically hand, for those who are new, we have a form, we call it kind of air quotes report card, and it's just kind of an accounting of the performance of the applicants, because all of the applicants are previous grantees. We have an idea of what they've done in the past, and we kind of give you a 1-sheet kind of report card so that you can see what all the different agencies have been doing this last year. And so we will have that for you. We typically hand it out at the work session. And then the scoring sheets are typically handed out at the presentation meeting, or I mean, in this case, emailed out, I'm sure. But so that's kind of the timeline. And then after that, the CAC has several weeks after the presentation meetings to score the applications. And then we have our allocation meeting on the first Monday in March.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Alrighty, I'll look back at my agenda.
Now it looks like it's other business.
Well, I just got to thinking, did we ever vote on whether or not Family Resources would be eligible for year 47? Is my memory that bad?
I believe the decision was to just
Give the
do an
extension.
extension through the 22nd, and if they don't make it, deal with the question of eligibility the next meeting. Am I understanding that
Thank you.
correctly?
That is
Okay.
my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Okay. I have no other business for you then, Mr. Chairman.
All right, is there any other business at all for any of the members? If not, I would like to call the meeting to adjournment. Like to, any vote, any,
Who had the motion? Okay.
a second?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
I second that.
We're awash in motions to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The meeting is now adjourned.
All right, well, thank you, everybody on the phone for calling in, and thank you, Nancy, for joining us for the first time, and we look forward to meeting you in person at some day in the hopefully near future, but who knows?
We will. We just don't know when yet.
Yes.
Thank you for having me with
Yeah.
you guys tonight.
Thank you.
Good
Bye,
work.
everybody.